Hi, this is Chandler Still, and today we're going to talk about my integrated teaching lessons for art education principles, not just art history. There are many lessons, so they're very short. They're not in intense detail. But to start off with, this is the art that I chose to base my lessons off of. This is the sudden shower over Shin-Ohashi Bridge and Ataki, and it's by Utagawa Hiroshige. He was an artist in the 1800s. This specific piece was printed in 1857, which was kind of later in his time, but it is a very popular piece. A lot of artists have actually redone it, so I think Picasso was one of them. He made his own version of this piece. But the first lesson I'm going to talk about, so all my lessons are 4th grade. I chose 4th grade because it was a little easier because they can do slightly more advanced stuff, and I thought this piece of art was a little more complex than some of the other ones. So the first one we'll do is the social studies, and we're going to tie that to art history. And so I'll start off with talking about the artist and the type of art it is, which is a woodblock print. And I'm going to tie that into transportation. So in this picture, they're walking across a bridge. And back in the 1800s, cars weren't invented until 1885, and this painting was made in 1857. So I want to see if my students can figure out that there weren't cars. Like, we'll talk about the history of when cars were made. So we'll discuss how when this was made, people weren't driving cars around. It's also in a bigger city, which we'll do some research on the city. So people probably walk to almost everywhere they go. In more rural areas back then, they probably had horse and buggy, stuff like that, but they weren't driving anywhere. They walked almost everywhere. And I want to compare and contrast that to big cities now. So like in New York City and Atlanta, a lot of people still walk everywhere they go, but there is also a lot of transportation. So for the project, or the lesson, it's kind of a project, I'm going to break my class into 4 or 5 groups, just depending on how many students I have, and each group's going to be assigned a different type of transportation. So we can have cars, we can have trains, airplanes, walking. I mean, that can be a transportation. I wouldn't do that, but so cars, trains, planes, let's see what else, buses, anything like that. And each group's going to have like a pile of information about their category. So like books or articles I found and I printed off and gave to them, or pictures, anything like that. And each group is going to be in charge of making a presentation. They can choose how to make the presentation. They can either do like a poster board, probably not PowerPoint because this is 4th grade and this is just going to be like a 1-day project, maybe broken into 2 days. They can just like write a paragraph or so, but they have to make a timeline. So the things they need to include are when was it invented, maybe who invented it, who used it first, so if it was affordable for everyone to use or only wealthy people could use it at first. Like I believe the car, they made it affordable for almost everyone, not everyone, but almost everyone, so it spread pretty quickly because everyone was able to afford it at first. And how did it grow and spread, and how did it have an impact on society? And then they'll present it to the class, and that will be their assessment, is how well they present it and how well they know about their transportation. And that is it for the social studies one. Okay, the second one we're going to do is language arts and aesthetics. So when I introduce this painting for this lesson, I'll ask the aesthetic questions, or I'll kind of reword them to match this painting. So we have, how does the rain in this print make you feel? What is the most interesting part of this artwork to you? Please explain that. Do you like or dislike this artwork, and why? and they can work in small groups or by themselves. If they're already at tables, have them work in groups. If not, just have them do it by themselves, and they'll write their answers on a piece of paper. And after that, we're going to have everyone write a narrative, just a short, like, one-page narrative. Everyone's going to pick a character from the painting. So there's 6 different people, or they can be creative and be the bridge or something like that. They're 4th grade. Let them be creative. Don't put too many guidelines on them. So we'll talk about how artists are always trying to share a story with their artwork. And it is now the student's job to try to figure out what that story is from the perspective of a certain character. We'll discuss, I want everyone to write in first person, so we'll discuss the pronouns to use for that. You can have like a chart that's like first person, second, and it has like what to use for each one. And their assessment will be their narrative and that they use first person effectively and that they made a logical sequence so their story made sense. It started from the beginning of the day and to the end of the day, and they're explaining a character from the painting's day and how they ended up on the bridge at that time. And I want to see, they're 4th graders, so I want to see good adjectives and verbs, simple and complex sentences. I want to see it, at this point in time, they should be getting better at writing. Okay, you should challenge them a little bit. So that's it for the language arts one. That one's kind of short. Okay, so the math one, next one is math, and the math we did the art project with as well. So, we'll talk about all the art principles. So I'm going to, say, what do you see in the art? What shapes are there? What colors are there? What actions? You can say what are the most used elements and principles of art, but only word it that way if they've already learned about the elements and principles of art, like in detail enough to be able to answer that question. If not, you can break it down. Do you see, and then state the element and state the principle of art. Say, what is the artist's story? What is he trying to share with us? And then have them rate the painting based on how much they like it or how well the artist did. So for this one, we're going to focus on parallel and perpendicular lines. And what made me do that is if you look at this painting, the way the rain is done, they're parallel lines and they're all over the entire painting. And the bridge has lines, very kind of intense lines, and the rest back here is real soft, but all this right here is very intense. A lot of parallel and perpendicular lines. The rain is parallel lines. So that's what I wanted to focus on. So we'll discuss parallel and perpendicular lines. And I'll have them look at the painting and try to find those lines after I talk to them and define each type of line. You can have like a chart, just like with the first person, second person stuff. You can have a chart that breaks it down into different kinds of lines, like parallel, perpendicular, curvy, stuff like that. But we're focusing on parallel and perpendicular. So what we're going to do is we're going to be working with yarn or any kind of string. Pipe cleaners will work, anything like that. If you don't have yarn or string, you can cut strips of construction paper. You can do anything like that. And we're going to figure out, we'll have them experiment with those and see what kind of lines they can make, or how many parallel lines they can put next to each other on their desk, or how many perpendicular lines they can make. And then after that, I'll have a worksheet that they fill in that talks about the lines, and they'll be able to answer the questions pretty effectively. And then for the art project part of the math, they're going to create a picture of an experience they've had in rain. So like almost everyone has been caught in rain before, or little kids, they love to jump in rain puddles. They love to play in the rain and in the mud. So this is something I feel like everyone could relate to pretty easily. So they're going to actually use the yarn or pipe cleaner or whatever you decided to use to create their painting. So first they're going to have a pencil, they're going to draw their whole picture. They have to, they must include lines, parallel and perpendicular. They need to have geometric shapes. I I really, really want them to make sure they use parallel lines to create the rain. That's the main thing I'm looking for. They need to have a lot of color. They need to have at least 3 colors. So they need to have like blue, because blue, like water, that's the main color I'm looking for. But they can be creative. They can make it pink rain. That's not important. So they just need 3 different colors at least. They need to make a person, and a stick person is not acceptable. I'm not very good at drawing people, so like one thing they can do like ovals or circles. So let's see if I can do this. I mean, if they're not good artists, I mean, some things like this would be fine, as long as it's more than just a stick person. This is really bad, but just something like that. Add clothes, just not a stick person. So they need to add all the details. We're not adding any color yet. We're just drawing the picture with pencils. They can add as many details as they need, but there needs to be an emphasis on the lines. And then after they're done drawing their picture, they're going to go over the parallel and perpendicular lines with with the yarn. They're going to glue it over the lines so that there's really an emphasis on that. And then the rest they can just use a marker to color with. So the assessment is that they followed all the guidelines, they included all the things you told them to. I would also like to see like some kind of tree in the picture, just to add some variety. Okay, that's it for the math one. Last one is the science project. So this picture has a lot of rain in it. We've already talked about a lot of rain. So we're going to talk about the water cycle. And the way I'll introduce that is I'm going to ask a lot of the same art principle questions, like what do you see, what's in the picture, what's going on, and we'll talk about how there's a big emphasis on the rain. And so then we're going to break it down and we're going to talk about the water cycle, because that's what you learn in 4th grade. So we'll start off by watching like a YouTube video of some kind that talks about the water cycle in whole. And then after that we'll break it down into each section of the water cycle. So we have evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and infiltration. And we'll break it down into each of those steps. For each steps, I will give them a definition, a picture, and we'll have some animation. Either you can replay that part of the video or find a different kind. Make sure at the end of it, going over each step of the water cycle, make sure no one has any questions, make sure everyone understands by asking them. Of course, not all students are going to say they don't understand, but you know, by doing their assessment, you'll be able to know. So after we break it down into each step, they're going to create a picture of the water cycle, so they can make it as detailed as they want, but it must have arrows showing which way the water is moving. It needs to have labels for each step. So wherever the arrow is, it needs to kind of have a label of what step that is. It needs to have a body of water, so like a pond or a lake or the ocean, whatever they choose. It needs to have clouds, because that's where the rain comes from. So there needs to be clouds at the top. There needs to be a section that has rain, and it needs to have some kind of plants. So like grass is fine, bushes, anything like that for the last step, because the last step is infiltration, where the water is going back into the earth. And that is their assessment. And this is a really long video, but I wanted to explain everything well. So, thanks for watching.